So Trindall had a ripper in a big game. So whilst our finals record isn't as illustrious, plentiful, or varied as that of many other clubs, there are still many matches and showings to reminisce. We've had many great team performances, but what about those individual performances? Those times when one player stood head and shoulders above the rest. As tempting as it is to give Ben Pomeroy's performance and try in the 2013 win over the Cowboys in week one of the finals I mentioned, it doesn't quite meet that mark. But there are some notables. Some honourable mentions like Paul Green with his double versus the Magpies in week one of 1996, Preston and Adam Dykes in 2001 in each of those 3 weeks until we won't mention the prelim. Jack Bird versus South in 2015. I'll put Mike Lennis in there too and a few others. Surprise packets like Matt Bickerstaff and Greg Bird in week 2 of the finals versus the Dragons in 2002. And Kurt Capewell out of nowhere when the chips were down in week 1 in Canberra in 2016. Plenty of hat-tricks have occurred over this time and they're worth a mention too. So I'm going to stretch out of the regular competition, go the Amco Cup final of 1979. The late, great Gary Cameron, a 5'8", who passed away earlier this year. He was a hat-trick hero in that match. The first player in Sharks colours to score a hat-trick in a big match. The next one was Paul Mellor with a hat-trick in finals week 1 at home, a win over the Broncos in 2001. Matt Reek in a loss to the Roosters in finals week 1 of 2002. And Missy Talapapa on the wing in a win over the Raiders in 2008. So here we go to the list of the best individual performances. You'll see there's a few caveats around this, and I'll have to admit that most of them were before my time. So thank you, David, for your assistance there. Thank you for a few others that provided some input as well on that. I had to do a fair bit of research on these ones. So they are ones from, let's say, late 80s and earlier, with a big asterisk around that towards the end. But you'll see that in a sec. So number 1, we have ET in the 1989 playoff versus the Broncos. So we had a playoff for 5th place. ET scored a try. He was absolutely electric. Unfortunately, that's a picture from a playing card from his finals week 1. So the following week performance against the Raiders where we lost. But ET scored a try. He was electric, set up several others, was just lightning quick, convincing win over essentially a state of origin side to get us into the finals there. So great stuff from ET. I'll throw to you guys in a sec to cover your memories of that period. Number 2, Gavin Miller. You could probably cover that whole period of 88, 89. He was just all the highlights I've seen. You guys lived it, but how good he was at putting players through holes, how much of a beating he suffered. But as a ball-playing lock, he is just untouched, unparalleled in his time, and really stood up in those big matches, including getting a try in that also in that playoff against the Broncos in 1989. Moving on to back into the 78 final series. So Steve Rogers, I've got some stats here. He was at peak of his powers, playing for Australia on kangaroo tours and the like, and absolutely carving up. So finals week 1, the major prelim semi-final versus the Manly Seagulls. We won 17 points to 14. He scored a try and kicked 4 goals. He would then score 4 goals in the preliminary final win over the Magpies that got us into the grand final, and then he kicked 4 from 4 in the 11-all draw. Absolutely vital to that side, and he had been playing in the final series back in 73 prior to that as well. But peak of his powers, just electric with the ball and lethal with the boot with the older toe-poking style. Moving on to Tommy Bishop, the 1973 grand final, the most brutal of all time. I'll throw just a shout out to Bishop for his entire short career with the club, but also that 73 final series. So our very first finals match was against the Dragons. We won 18-0. It was Tommy Bishop and Ken Madison who scored tries that day. And Tommy Bishop kicked a field goal in the prelim final win over the Newtown Jets to make the grand final. And then knowing that they didn't have the, let's say, skill to match it with Bob Fulton and his Manly side, he absolutely captain coach. He organised the strategy, was behind all of the, let's say, the roughhousing, but also had that finesse as well to move the team around the paddock. And it was a very tight loss in the end by only 3 points. So despite that's the only caveat being a losing side there, he was unbelievable. And unfortunately, due to financial issues with the club, was unable to be re-signed at the end of that year, which is a tragedy to this day. Fun fact though, leaving the 2016 grand final top of our bay at the southern end after we'd seen the team, or do the lap and all that. Tommy Bishop was standing there, and I gave him a high five, which was great to see. So he's getting on now, but absolute legend of our side. But moving on, you're probably thinking, hey, there's a few more players in here from 2016. How are you going to fit them all in? Yes, I broke some rules. So week 1 was Matt Pryor. Week 3 was James Maloney. And week 4, Lewis won the Clive, but Fafita won there. Made history, those 3 there. And that's the trilogy. And I think that they're all a chicken or egg thing, especially Maloney. I think it was a good team performance and a great win against the Cowboys. Whether I'd pick one between Pryor and Maloney, Pryor and Fafita, I think you can't have one without the other. If Pryor doesn't step up in that match against Canberra and score that try just before halftime, we don't go through. And Fafita doesn't have the opportunity to win the grand final for us. So that's why all 3 tied there. But if I was going to order them, I'd say Pryor/Fafita number 1 and Maloney a very close number 2. So they're my standouts. I'll throw to you guys. Boldo, probably you first. Any of those?
Man, that list was absolutely incredible. God, that was so much fun just thinking about that. I'd probably say Adam Dykes in that 2001, our best ever finals. I might have found a spot for Adam Dykes. Would have been mine.
I'll finish with you, Francis. I'll just hold there. Lats, any of those stick out to you or any others you want to shout out?
Yeah, mate. We got down to one slot left, and I thought I was going to go Maloney or Fafita 2016, and you gazumped me on both, mate. But Fafita.
Yeah, I broke the rules there. Yeah.
Fafita, what a try. What a moment. Should have been the medalist, but we won't go into that. I thought Maloney, and he was great in that prelim final against the Cowboys, bagging a double. And I thought honourable mentions to Wade Graham and Luke Lewis over that final series also in 2016.
Yeah. I mean, to win those big matches, you need plenty of players to stand up. But I'll throw to you, Francis. Obviously, I mentioned a few sides that you were involved with back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Do you have any memories of anyone particular from that era or all these other ones I've mentioned?
Oh, just the ones you've mentioned. My pick for my memory and fantastic thrills and day that I'll never forget was Fafita's try, being out there. And I acknowledge what you said. We couldn't have got there without beating Canberra. But Fafita's effort was just spectacular and just I'll never forget it. But in the day back when I was working with the team, I thought, Steve Rogers' son, Matty, was a standout, an awesome attacker. I think might have been towards the end of the season game at Newcastle. He tore the team apart. He was doing the burst down the wing and the inside kick and had E.T. and Peachy and Preston all sort of chasing the balls and often getting tries off those inside kicks. And we're seeing a lot of that back in the footy now. It's quite exciting. So, I think you'd have Matty Rogers up there. He's an awesome person to have in your team. Such a lovely fellow and a fantastic player. Yeah.
Yeah, and a quick preview before my Chronicles episode this week, which will be the prelim final win over the Raiders in Super League 1997. Looking at that, Matt Rogers was outstanding in that final series as well. So great with the boot, great with the ball. Ray Warren said that he could not remember a better wing centre pairing as E.T. and Rogers. That they were completely synchronised at all times and were flawless with the ball. And you could see that basically every time they touched it, something was going to happen. And Matt Rogers especially, he was great. Obviously, goal kicking. He himself has said that kicking the Gilbert ball was a lot better than kicking the Steeden ball. So his kicking percentage was a lot higher that year. And it was the first player in Australian rugby league to use a kicking tee rather than sand, but also too with the ball in hand. Very, very good, ahead of his time as a lethal winger. Anyway, that was fun, guys.